Welcome back to the Explainer. All right, let's dive right into this one because today we're unpacking something truly fascinating, but also pretty complex. We're going to deconstruct a really dense, emotionally charged, and frankly, highly erratic source text. What we have here is a document that reveals a worldview completely dominated by this intense sense of unseen surveillance and systemic behavioral control. It's kind of like a labyrinth of a text, and we're going to navigate it together to clearly map out exactly what this author is experiencing and claiming. Right off the bat, the text hits us with this massive philosophical question. Izadi, what is freedom? It's such a powerful hook, right? It immediately establishes this ominous, deeply questioning tone. From the very first line, we're dropped into a reality where the fundamental concept of free will isn't just a given, it's more like a desperate fading memory. And it immediately follows that up with a really raw mix of Hindi and English, stating, "Aap kya karte hai, sab kuch dikhaya jaya hai," which translates to, everything you're doing is being observed. Just chilling, honestly. This immediate answer sets the stage for the rest of our explainer. The speaker firmly believes they're living their entire life under this inescapable microscope, where literally every single action is being monitored by an unseen audience. So, to make sense of this chaotic landscape, we've structured things into 5 key areas: the illusion of freedom, surveillance and hidden gadgets, the games of authority, mental persecution, and finally, a cry for justice. Let's start with part 1, the illusion of freedom. Basically, who is actually controlling the choices? Now, when you hear the word behaviorism, you probably think of a standard college psychology class, right? Well, the text radically redefines it. In the speaker's reality, behaviorism isn't an academic discipline, it's a malicious, oppressive system. They describe these unseen scholars, they even call them the Satans of behaviorism, who use covert technologies to forcefully program human choices, implant negative thoughts, and literally mandate specific reactions. In this context, the human brain has essentially been hijacked. You might be wondering, how exactly is this control supposedly achieved? Well, the text outlines a very specific list of methods. The speaker claims that evil thoughts are programmed directly into their consciousness. They talk about digital cloning of their iPhone without consent, and it spills into the physical world too, sabotaging career paths, secretly administering drugs to induce negative emotions, and even orchestrating life-threatening situations purely to force a reaction out of them. It is a completely totalizing system of manipulation. Moving on to Section 2, Surveillance and Hidden Gadgets, or the Unseen Eye. The speaker actually boils down their profound distrust of the world into this one incredibly punchy declaration: society is a criminal system. For the author of this text, society isn't a community at all. It's viewed as this vast, interconnected laboratory designed specifically to entrap them. Laws, norms, institutions, they're all just seen as instruments of this criminal architecture. And the sheer scale of the paranoia here is staggering. The text describes an extensive global surveillance network. The speaker believes they are continuously monitored by highly expensive, unseen gadgets, and that their interactions have been recorded all the way back to childhood. They describe feeling like they're living in a prison cell equipped with thermal sensors, scrutinized not just by locals, but by investigators from the US, the UK, Bangladesh, Pakistan. They genuinely perceive themselves as a global test subject in a never-ending experiment. Which brings us to Section 3, the games of authority, playing with lives. The really crucial point to grasp here is the absolute power imbalance. The text constantly refers to this dynamic as the game. On one side, you've got the victim, our speaker, who is just seeking salvation and career success, but they're stripped of all choices and then penalized for the reactions they're forced to make. On the flip side, you have the authority. According to the text, the authority doesn't care about justice, they seek maximum rewards, they run what the text calls psycho games. They sometimes pose as fake rescuers to build false trust, and they even leverage the victim's suffering for vote bank politics. It's a completely rigged game. The text doesn't hold back on naming the players either. It gives a very specific roster of antagonists. The speaker names the Satans of Mumbai, claiming they're funded by hidden entities in Assam. They point to high-class intelligence operatives and cognitive psychologists. The paranoia even trickles down to local encounters, detailing fake police officers who are supposedly acting as hypnotists, and it scales all the way up to politicians who, the speaker claims, use this individualized psychological persecution for election gains down south. And that leads to a pretty dark realization, captured perfectly in this stark quote from the text: everything is fair in games. Because the authorities view all of this as just a rewarding experiment, the speaker believes these antagonists operate with zero moral boundaries. There's literally no line they won't cross, because to them, the victim is nothing more than data. Let's look at Section 4, Mental Persecution, the Personal Toll. To really wrap our heads around this text, we have to ground these huge theories in the speaker's personal losses. They quantify their suffering by dropping specific time frames amidst all the chaos. They mention working in a forensic lab for 8 months before being inexplicably kicked out, which they attribute entirely to the surveillance. They talk about a 2-year game played by intelligence psychologists. They reference a 3-year period of critical, unseen interrogation by Western investigators. And perhaps the most tragic part, they lament a 7 to 9 year duration where all their past creative work and career progress have just been completely dead and blocked. The fallout described here is incredibly tangible to the speaker. We're talking about stolen songs written for politicians that were falsely copyrighted under other names. They mourn the total loss of their Bollywood career dreams. But it goes way beyond just career sabotage. The speaker alleges actual physical danger, referencing attempted murders in Pondicherry, Kolkata, and Mumbai. On top of that, they claim international lawsuits have been filed against them over verbal slangs, basically angry words they feel they were forcefully provoked into saying by the system. And this is where we see the actual mechanics of the trap. It's a vicious catch-22. Step 1. The authority applies a negative stimulus. This could be covert chemicals, blocking a career path, or ruining a reputation. Step 2. The victim, pushed to the absolute brink, is forced to react emotionally, maybe by lashing out with verbal abuse. Then, Step 3. The authority meticulously records that provoked reaction and uses it as quote-unquote evidence to file global lawsuits and penalize the victim even more. They are stuck in a loop where their own pain is constantly weaponized against them. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, a cry for justice and the idea of an impossible resolution. The text presents a really despairing paradox about justice. To the speaker, true justice would mean protecting the victim, acknowledging the years of psychological torture, and punishing the actual authorities orchestrating it. But the reality they face is the system's justice. Because the system is run by the antagonists themselves, its version of justice just involves collecting cloned data, playing vote bank politics, and protecting the experiment at all costs. So finding salvation within the very system that is actively persecuting you, it's impossible by definition. So what's the outcome? It leads to this incredibly bleak realization: zero solutions, literally none. As long as the authorities continue the experiment to reap their rewards, the speaker recognizes that there is absolutely no way to win the game by playing it. The system is perfectly sealed. Ultimately, all that exhaustion just boils down to one incredibly simple, almost heartbreaking plea directed right at their perceived oppressors. Do not respond and leave. Give freedom to someone. That's a solution. After all the sprawling theories of global surveillance and high-level psychological warfare, all the victim really wants is for the unseen watchers to just turn off the monitors, walk away, and give them their life back. We've unpacked a lot of profound psychological weight today, looking at a reality entirely defined by invisible boundaries and assumed surveillance. And it leaves us with one final provocative thought. Regardless of what you make of the hidden gadgets or the global investigators, the text forces us to ask, if the mind fundamentally believes it's forever just a pawn in an unseen game, can it ever truly be free? Understanding these extreme bounds of perception really makes you realize just how fragile our own realities can be. Thanks for hanging out with me on The Explainer today. I'll catch you in the next one.